Good morning to you all. Thank you very much for joining me. Can I please have a show of hands if you're able to see me? Use your Zoom hand because I can't see the actual you. Fantastic. A few more hands. Yes, great, super. Thank you very much, everybody. What I'll do is I'll lower all hands. First of all, I'm Sir Taylor. Thank you very much for joining me this Sunday morning when I am sure you have many other things you could be doing, but I promise you that I'm going to do my utmost to make it worth your while. What I'll do is I'll proceed without further ado with my PowerPoint presentation because that is my primary means of communicating to you the things that I wish to communicate today. You're very welcome here today. I am Sir Taylor, and I should tell you that I cannot see you. I cannot hear you either, but I have a list of names, a long list of names of people who have made this time to learn what they need to learn in order to be able to make good choices for their children. We do have people from various parts of the country. I should mention that most frequently we get people from Middlesex, London, Berkshire, especially Slough and Langley, Buckinghamshire. The entire county, of course, has grammar schools. But we also get quite a lot of people from Surrey because of the grammar schools down there. Likewise with Kent, Essex, Birmingham, Manchester, Wiltshire, and some coming up from Hampshire. So what I'm going to tell you today actually applies to everybody equally. But it does lead us to the question of why you are here. And I am making an assumption about this, which is that you're here because you want to do the best for your children. And since this is the assumption of my briefing for you today, if that isn't why you're here, then you are in the wrong place and you can continue with those many things, other things that you could be doing instead. Now, because this is what I do and this is my full-time profession and has been for a couple of decades, I get some idea about what parents think is important about preparing their children for 11 plus. And these are some of the things that parents do seem to think are most important in preparing for 11 plus. So what I would like you to do is look at this list and look for yourself in it. Test formats or patterns. Is it CEM? Is it GL? Is it some other provider? There are many others. It's about learning exam techniques. It's about speed. It's about word lists, vocabulary lists, reading lists, lists of books, flashcards for vocabulary, synonyms, antonyms, practice, practice, practice. It's the practice. It's comprehension practice, practice at comprehension texts, comprehension exercises. It's mocks, mocks, mocks. This is the key. They are mistaken, all of those. It's not that they're irrelevant. It's just that they're not the most important things. And what happens is that many parents think these are the most important things, and that's where they put their energies and their efforts, and they actually miss out on the real most important things, which you're going to discover today. We'll come back to that, by the way. Now, is it education you aspire to, flourishing of your child, or is it only getting them into a grammar school? Or do you equate them? Do you think that getting your child into a grammar school is going to be great for them? Is grammar school even a safe environment for your child? And what proportion of education do you believe occurs in school? Well, I realize that what I've done is I've answered a question with lots of questions, but you see, it's questions that are key to teaching, to education. So the next question is, why am I here? Well, it's very, very simple: to share my expertise and insights with you in order to empower you to make better choices for yourself and your children, to which some people say, but why? And the answer to that is, well, why wouldn't I? I'm a parent too. I wish somebody had told me these things. Well, so give yourself a chance. I am going to share important insights. Some might sting at first, meaning you might not like the sound of them at first. But I suggest you reflect, and your children might reap the rewards. Give it time to sink in, and you will have the opportunity to make more informed decisions and choices. Right, the first thing is to beware that you are not your feelings. I'm going to play a short video clip, by the way, as well as using some PowerPoint slides. I'm using some video clips, all of which are from YouTube and freely available to anybody, and a few anecdotes. Here's the first video clip.
It's also important to remember that you are not your feelings. One of the most important things that you can learn from this book, and more importantly for life, is that you are not your feelings. Your feelings are there to give you an example of how you could react, but that doesn't mean you have to act in that way. So remember, you do not have to act on your feelings. When you understand that your feelings are just suggestions for how you could act in a situation and not what you have to do, you will become unstoppable.
Okay, so number one, you are not your feelings. Feelings are things we experience, events that take place inside our bodies, our brains. But they are not us. Now, this is an important learning straight away for you today, but also for you to share with your child, because children are very prone to identifying with their feelings. And sometimes they behave very poorly as a result. And if you explain to them, yes, feelings are real, they take place inside you, but they are not you. You are not your feelings. This is important because some of the things I share with you today are going to invoke or provoke feelings. Why should you heed me even if you don't like what I say? I mean, I hope you will like what I say. I am motivated to educate and not by profit. For example, we teach in small groups because that is most effective for learning, but very bad for making profits. I can therefore tell you what you need to know in order to be able to make better choices. I should tell you a little bit about me, seeing as I'm going to be sharing quite a lot of insights and information with you. You need to know where I'm coming from. Just before I do that, I wanted to mention that there is a Q&A at the end, and normally I allow up to an hour for Q&A, but today I'm going to cut it to half an hour because I have a lesson at 1 for which I need to do some preparation. So who is Sir Taylor? Who am I? Actually, my name is Sudhir Taylor, and I just shorten it to Sir Taylor for professional reasons. I was born in Kenya, spent a little time in India as a child, and then I immigrated from there. Can I please see a show of hands? Who else here is an immigrant, i.e. you were not born in this country? May I see a show of hands, please? Raise your hand, your Zoom hand, because I can't see you, your Zoom hand, thank you. Oh, it looks like we only, roughly a half of you, okay. Well, we have that in common. I am a dad to 2 daughters. I always feel obliged to prove that. Here they are. Kavita on the left just finished her degree this summer, and Nilam works as a journalist for The Guardian. I have been in the world of teaching and training since 1985, part of which was a 10-year spell in the Royal Navy, training sailors and officers. I've been teaching my own 11+ course, the Sir Taylor 11+ course, since 2001. So it became 20 this year. And I estimate I have personally taught between 10,000 and 20,000 people over the 36-year career, probably closer to the 20,000 now. And not least, I try to do my bit to make the world a better place for all of us and our children. So in the nutshell, that is where I am coming from. So what is it that drives me? Well, it is a vision to empower people like you and your children, by enhancing their love of and skills in learning and reasoning. In other words, I believe in the power of education to improve the world and people's lives. That's why I am a teacher and an educator. So here's a rhetorical question. You don't need to answer it because I know the answer is yes, because you're here. Are you serious about doing the best for your child? Well, I'm just making a point here, or reinforcing a point I've already made. You may or may not have heard of Carl Sagan. Look him up if you haven't, S-A-G-A-N. He was a physicist and a communicator about science. He was in fact the world's authority on the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, in other words, aliens. And he passed away in the 90s. But because he was the leading expert in the world on the search for extraterrestrial life, his opinion was frequently sought on that subject. And journalists would be frequently asking, so, is there life out there? Is there life out there? Everybody wants to know the answer to the question. But his answer was always the thinking man's answer, the scientist's answer, which is that we can't say one way or the other because the evidence is not in. We do not have evidence to say there is life. We do not have evidence to rule it out either. And of course, that's not a satisfactory headline for a journalist seeking a headline. So he was pressed on one occasion to say, but Carl, what does your gut tell you? And this was his answer. But I try not to think with my gut. If I'm serious about understanding the world, thinking with anything besides my brain, as tempting as that might be, is likely to get me into trouble. So a typically good-humored, but thoughtful and intelligent response. In other words, what he's saying is if you're serious about understanding something, then you need to put your feelings, your gut, your instinct to one side and use your head, which is what I'm asking of you. It is learning, new thinking, new thoughts. That's what learning is. It's creating new pathways in the brain. That's what learning is. If all we're doing is reinforcing existing pathways, not actually learning anything. It's what I say to the children. If you do a worksheet, you do a test and you get full marks, you learn nothing from it. So sometimes new thoughts, new ideas can be in conflict with some old thoughts. They might be contradictory. Then what do? Obviously, you want to choose the best way of thinking, the best understanding of something, update your knowledge, update your understanding. You need to reflect logically about which thoughts are better. Okay, the first thing then is the model that I use to try and explain. I call it the Pyramid of Flourishing. This is anybody's flourishing, but right now we're talking about your child who might be in year 4, might be in year 3, might be in year 5, could be in any year, but really if you're looking ahead to 11 plus, this is what I would like to show you. That the foundation, the bottom layer of the pyramid, the most important thing without which all else fails is mind management. And the next layer of the pyramid is mindset. If the mindset is not right, then the rest of it is also somewhat undermined. Then there's perspective. That is your perspective on the whole thing. And then at the tip of the pyramid, founded on having a healthy perspective, having a sound, a good, healthy mindset, and that based upon sound mind management, all of that can allow a child to flourish when it comes to 11 plus. So the first layer of the pyramid, the most important, the biggest layer, is mind management, and everything else is founded upon this. Mind management, that is managing your mind, that is you managing your mind management, as well as your child's mind management, is critical to your child's flourishing. Of course it is, your mom, your dad. So your mind management is critical for your child's mind management. Here's a question then to help you understand about mind management. What are some of the things that you do that you know you should not do? Or things that you avoid doing that you know you should do? Now, these can be trivial things, but think of something. I'm sure something has already come to mind without me prompting you, but it could be as trivial as things you do that you know you should not do. Eating lots of sweet foods. How about that? Eating lots of fatty foods. Things that you avoid doing that you know you should do, well, maybe exercise. A lot of people don't exercise sufficiently. These are just everyday examples, but you'll have your own. So now you've thought of something. The next question is slightly more challenging. Why is it that you sometimes don't do what you know is a sensible thing to do? Because you've got this little voice in your head saying, wait a minute, this isn't good for me. Why am I doing it? So, but you find yourself saying, I'll do it anyway. So why is that? Why is it sometimes you don't do what you know is the sensible thing to do? That's a little more challenging. Now, at this point, you might be thinking, oh, I'm just a terrible person. I'm just a weak person. I'm just not very good. I'm not a very good parent. I'd like you to put those thoughts to one side, please, because they're not actually right. Who is your biggest enemy? Don't beat yourself up. You are not a terrible person. It's not you. It's your chimp. This chap here, who walks like a person, talks like a person, dresses like a person, can operate a tablet like a person, but is actually a chimp. And if you're unaware of your chimp, you are in trouble. Well, I'm going to sort that out for you today because I'm making you aware of your chimp. So what is this chimp thing? Well, your chimp isn't an actual chimpanzee, an animal that you keep as a pet, not quite. It is actually, your chimp lives in your head. It lives in your head, but is not you. I think that if you, best way to help you understand this is with a video clip from YouTube, which I think is a very nice introduction to the concept of this chimp.
There are 3 core tenets to the book. You have a chimp and a human in your head, and they want very distinct things. Your human is a simplified representation of your prefrontal cortex and some other parts of your brain that handle long-term thinking, delayed gratification, emotion control, consideration, and ethics. You also have a chimp in your brain. This is the limbic system and all the older parts of your brain, the parts of your brain that we would have had more in common with a chimp. Steve Peters separates out these parts of the brain and says that they want completely distinct things. They have entirely different motivations. And if you don't understand this and fail to put them in their appropriate places, then you will be forever in conflict within your own mind. This book is extremely simple. It has no flowery words or high concept ideas. It's plain and simple, to the point. You've got 2 dudes in your head, a chimp and a human. They are in conflict. You need to sort out that conflict if you want to have a happy, healthy, long life. And there is great, great power in this simplicity. Anytime you find yourself being overly emotional, reactive, sad, scared, you have to realize that your chimp is acting out. Anytime you feel hurt or jealous, it is the chimp that is in control. Realize that you are not your chimp. The chimp is like a child that you must always look after and that will never grow up. It will always remain the chimp, and you must accept it as it is. Don't control and hate the chimp. Manage and love the chimp. This requires you to listen and give it what it needs. So if the chimp is frightened, you don't just go, shut up, or ignore it, or berate it, or anything like that. You don't ignore your emotions. You don't ignore what your body is telling you. Instead, you listen, and then you find the most logical, rational solution to the problem. You must be a problem solver. And if you don't find solutions that appease the chimp and make the human happy, you will be forever miserable. If you don't make the chimp happy, if you ignore it or try to trick it, then it will take over. Your chimp needs sex, it needs a tribe, it needs love and security, and it needs territory. And you have to give it these things, amongst other things, to avoid internal conflict. You must satisfy its needs, keeping check on it like you would with a small, scared child. If you do this, then it will behave. By separating out the parts of your brain and giving them identities, it allows you to distance yourself from the more base, reactive parts of your mind, and thereby love yourself more. Where once you might say, why the hell do I always get so angry over such small, silly things? I'm such a goddamn loser. You now say, why does this get your back up? And how can we make sure this happens less in the future? What do you need, Jim? I mean, you might or might not say it in a weird, fake American accent. This acceptance of all aspects of yourself is pure liberation. The vast majority of people are completely ruled by their chimps, and they don't even realize it. This makes them act in an angry, petty, possessive, egotistical way. If you keep an awareness of this, then when people act out, it allows you to have more compassion, empathy, and patience with them. You can say, hang on a second, this person is clearly ruled by their chimp. Sure, they may be doing me wrong, but far better to have some slight I can bounce back from in 3 seconds than to have an unruly chimp who is on the clock 24/7, causing mayhem and terror and destroying one's life.
In this clip and the previous one, mention was made of the book and Steve Peters. This is the book. It's called The Chimp Paradox, and it is by Professor Stephen Peters. And this is so important as a foundation, so important for parents, that is, to be aware of, and then for parents to teach children about, that I actually issued this book to the parents of all children on the 11+ program. So you have every opportunity to educate yourself about this. And if you are unfamiliar with your chimp, it is probably making important decisions for you that you'd rather be making yourself. So who is in charge? Is it you or is it your chimp? When you look at any particular decision, who made that decision? Was it you? You know, that's the aspiration, the family person, the caring, loving person with noble aims and motives. And then there's the reality all too often, which is that actually is the chimp that's in charge. Well, we'll come to that just now, which is the key question is, how can you recognize when your chimp is in charge and when is it that you are in charge? Fortunately for you, it's actually really, really easy. And here is a summary of it. By all means, throughout this presentation, please feel free to record, to take screenshots, whatever helps you. This is a very useful summary of how you can tell. So look on the left side. Left is good. It's what we aspire to. It's what is best in us. It is what is human. Good ways to make decisions. When it comes to an important decision, any important decision, but since we're all thinking about 11+, I'll use that as a scenario. If you're thinking, is grammar school good for your child? If so, where, how to prepare them for the 11+ test? Then you, the human, would ask questions like, why is this important? What are the facts? And seeing as on any subject, you can get endless facts to the point where you're overwhelmed, you ask, which are the important facts? Which facts matter the most? Which is all driven by values. It all starts from the why. And which decision makes the best logical sense? These are human ways of thinking. The reality is this, and you'll be aware of it. It's your chimp making a decision. These are bad ways of making decisions, important decisions. What are others doing? I.e. looking around to see what other people are doing rather than thinking for yourself and your children. How will it make me look? In other words, rather than what is right, it's, does it make me look okay? Do I look good? Do I look as if I'm trying? What will people think? Which is really the same question. And importantly, what do my urges say? Which is back to Carl Sagan's point, that if you want to make sense, you need to think with something other than your gut, i.e. your brain. Not your gut, your instinct, your feelings. So whenever you are making a decision based upon what other people are doing, how it makes you look, what other people might think of what you are doing, so what is your gut, your instinct, your feeling saying? That is the chimp. That is not you. Really simple. Right, goals. Think of 1 or 2 goals that you have. It doesn't matter what they are. They're completely private. I'm not going to ask you to share them. They're completely private. Think of a goal that you have and aim. Now, please do think of a goal and put your hand up when you've thought of something. It can be trivial, it can be huge, but it's a goal that you have, something you would like to achieve or attain. Please raise your hand when you have thought of a goal. I'll mention one of mine. It's to lose, let's say, 4 pounds over the next month. £1 a week seems reasonable to me. Okay, all right. So yeah, I'm seeing 1 or 2 hands. Thank you very much for your participation. And can I just mention, participation is a really important part of learning, and it's one of the things we prioritize in our courses. That, you know, if you're not participating, you're really just warming up a chair, and you're not really warming up your brain. Thank you very much for participating. Okay, I'm going to lower all hands now, because now that you have a goal in your mind, let's talk about goals and success. Generally speaking, if we achieve our goals, we call that success. So perhaps some of you are thinking along these lines, perhaps, I don't know, getting your child into a grammar school seems like a sensible and noble goal, doesn't it? Or perhaps getting your child into a particular grammar school. Perhaps there's one just down the road, or perhaps your older child already goes to a grammar school, and how convenient it would be if your next child goes to the same school. It would be wonderful for everybody. That's a great goal, isn't it? Well, no, is the short answer. Wrong on both counts. Getting your child into a grammar school or getting your child into a particular grammar school is not a sensible goal. Now, at this, your chimp feels indignant and says, how dare you? So that's the chimp reaction. Some of you might have experienced that just now. Whereas your human is intrigued and wonders why. What is he getting at? What's the point that Mr. Taylor is trying to make here? Well, now you see Rosie appear on the screen. That is a reminder to share an anecdote. Rosie was my pupil about 20 years ago. I was teaching a lesson in Langley Pavilion, as it happens, in Langley, on a Sunday. And in that group of children, there were 2 girls. One of them was called Rosie, and the other her friend, whose name I don't recall. But they used to come and go together. They were family friends, and they were in school together. And they used to come and go to and from lessons together. And at the time, I lived in Slough. And I used to do my weekly shop at what used to be the Co-op. And I was there sometime after the 11+ exams took place, long after the course had finished, doing my weekly shop. And I saw Rosie and her family, and they were quite jubilant, it seemed to me, very happy. And when they saw me, they came up, the father greeted me and shook my hand, and he thanked me and shared the wonderful news that Rosie had passed the 11+ and would be going to one of the grammar schools in Slough. And I was really delighted. I was very pleased for them. I congratulated them, and I felt a bit good about what I do, which is helping to educate children. And so, feeling good, I carried on with my shop. And then at the end of the aisle, I saw Rosie's friend's family. And it looked like there had been a death in the family because of the way they were carrying themselves. And they did look as if they had a death in the family. So I went up to them and I asked, is everything okay? And the father could barely make eye contact with me. And he said, that his daughter hadn't made it through the 11+. And I thought, wait a minute, is this the reason why you are behaving as if there has been a death in the family? I didn't say this, by the way, it's just what I thought. And then suddenly my good feeling about what I do went away, it evaporated. And I resolved in that moment, having realized that this is actually the way many parents are thinking. They're thinking that 11+ is almost like do or die, and that if your child doesn't get into a grammar school, if they fail the 11+, then that is as if there has been a death in the family. It's the end of life as you know it. And I was thought to myself, what an idiotic, ridiculous, childish, chimp reaction that is. I didn't think chimp at the time because I didn't know about it. For an parent to have, do you even realize what impact you are having on your child? And I realized that this is the most harmful thing about 11+. It is the reactions of some parents, the priorities of some parents. It isn't their children, it isn't their child's welfare. That's why my initial question on the first slide for the presentation was, is it about education or is it about grammar school? So I resolved at that time to actually educate and inform parents so that they can behave like parents and not like chimps. So here we are. What is success then, if it's not getting your child into a grammar school and what have you? Well, depends how you think of it. Your health is your real wealth. And I think COVID has taught that to a lot of people who lost sight of it. Is it happiness? Well, I really like this picture because I think, and what it says, two things prevent us from happiness: living in the past and observing others. I think there's a lot of mileage in that. Okay, which brings us to what are sensible goals then, if getting your child into a grammar school isn't sensible? Here we go.
The book is also great because it talks about how to set effective goals. Because a lot of the times, if you set a goal and don't reach it, you'll feel disappointed with yourself. But there's a way you can avoid this disappointment, and that's by setting a goal that isn't controlled by external factors. For example, you could set a goal of getting a job, but there's no guarantee you're going to get it. However, what if you change your goals to reading up on the job, learning interview techniques, and how to act the part? If you don't get the job, you can still be happy because you've achieved your goals and maximize your chance of getting.
Okay, sensible goals are goals that you have control over. Setting yourself the goal of getting a particular job is not a sensible goal because you do not have control over it. Sorry if that's news and a disappointment to you. You may think, oh, sure, you have control over it. No, you don't. You do have control over how good your CV looks. You do have control over how you present yourself on the day. You do have control over how good your interview techniques are. You do have control over how well you research the company and the job that you are applying for. Sure. And those are great goals. So on the left, reading up on the job, learning interview techniques, how to act the part, and so on. Those things are in your control. They are good goals. But getting the job? No. Why isn't that in your control? Very simple. You're not the one who makes the decision. Somebody on the interview panel makes the decision, or the group of people. And you can influence or try to influence what they think, but in the end, one of them makes the decision. I must apologize. You know, I mentioned my daughter Nilam, who works at The Guardian. She has the worst timing of anybody ever, and I can't wait to tell her about that. It was her. Apologies for the interruption. The people on the interview panel are humans, for the most part. We as humans sometimes make decisions for reasons we ourselves don't know. You can well imagine that sometimes you meet somebody you've never met before and you just have some liking for them and you're not sure why. Or sometimes the opposite. You meet somebody you've never met before or hear about and you have a disliking for them without knowing why. Well, the same happens for the people on the interview panel. And it's got nothing to do with all your reading up, your interview techniques, acting the part, how good your CV is and all of that. It could be something as simple as you remind them at a subconscious level of somebody else that they knew. And that's it. I mean, I'm just giving an illustration to make the point that you don't have control over whether you get the job. And the same applies for children sitting 11+ test. You don't have control over whether your child passes and gets to a grammar school or a particular grammar school. Neither does your child. This has been my profession for the last 20 years plus, preparing children for 11+ tests. I don't have control over whether your child passes. Why not? Well, I'll tell you. Because sure, your child has control over how much effort they put in, whether they do what they are told to do, whether they study the way that they are told to study, whether they use the resources in the way that they are told to use the resources. whether they learn from their errors the way that we teach children to learn, whether there's a million things involved in preparing children for 11+. And yes, we have control over what we provide: teaching, resources, processes, information, education. And the children have control over how much effort they put in. You have control over how much effort you put in, whether you're following education and guidance that we provide. But you know what? On the day of the exam, there are a million things that you don't have control over, things that you would never even think of. Here's one. The first sign I have that I'm feeling a little ill, or perhaps about to get a little ill, is that I'm having difficulty remembering my times tables. That's my first sign. Now imagine that your child gets that first sign in their 11+ test. There were no symptoms, no runny nose, no cough, no temperature, nothing. But on the day of the exam, they started getting this. It could be that they just didn't have a full night's sleep the night before the exam, and you know how lack of sleep can affect your ability to focus, and that can drastically affect your performance on the day of the exam. Let me give you an anecdote about things that can affect your child's performance. About 19 or 20 years ago, 19 I think, there was a boy, Nikhil, who did my 11+ course, and he was a top student in his school and on the 11+ course, and he took everything in his stride, and everybody felt that, you know, he's destined to go to grammar school, and he himself aspired to go into medicine. I suspect he did succeed in that. But it turns out that in the 11+ exam for Slough, he scored 110, and the pass mark was 111, which, by the way, is the worst score anybody can ever get, missing the pass mark by 1. And it's what happened to him. And it was a complete mystery to me, because he was thoroughly ready for the exam and very capable of acing it. That is, it was a mystery until his mum told me it was her fault. And this is how it was her fault. In order to try and get the best from Nikhil and to encourage him to make his best effort on the day of the exam, on the way to him sitting the exam, she had said, "Look, son, just give your best, and afterwards we'll take you to Thorpe Park as a treat." And he was so excited about that prospect of going to Thorpe Park that throughout the exam, of course, his mind was partly on that. And that caused him to underperform and miss by just 1 mark. It's quite remarkable that he got within a mark of passing under those circumstances. But look, many parents frequently do things in order to try to support their children and inadvertently undermine their children. And this is just a really good illustration of that. There are many other things that parents do also, that you have the best of intentions, as we parents do, but for want of a bit of understanding and knowledge, we end up actually undermining our children. This is why I'm here. This is why I issue the Chimp Paradox. This is why I sit here on a Sunday morning, once a month, every month, in order to give other parents the opportunity to learn these things that are actually going to help our children rather than undermine them. But then how do you measure success if it's not passing, going to grammar school and so on? Well, here we are. Measure success in life by effort and doing your best. Then it's in your hands to succeed and be proud of yourself. In other words, don't hold yourself responsible for the things that are out of your control. Hold yourself responsible for the things that are in your control. Measure your success by the things that are within your power to do, not by the things that are out of your power. Right, now we come to the second part, which is mindset. So the foundation layer is mind management. Then the second layer is mindset. So your mindset can help or hinder you in striving towards your potential and your child in striving towards their potential. So in other words, your mindset is going to affect your child. as well as you. Now, this is a really good introduction to mindset, so please take note of this.
Do you have a growth mindset? How do you think of intelligence? Do you think you're born with a certain level of intelligence that you can't change much? Or do you think it's something you can work on to develop and grow? Many students think that their level of intelligence is fixed, that they can't do much to change it. This can lead them to feeling that they just aren't smart enough to succeed, especially when courses get more challenging. But what if you knew that no matter who you are, through effort and effective strategies, you can develop your level of intelligence? According to Stanford University psychologist Carol Dweck, how we think about our brains actually affects how well we learn. Dweck says that people generally think with one of two different mindsets, a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. People with a fixed mindset believe that their intelligence is fixed at birth and they can't do much to change it. People with a growth mindset believe that their talents, abilities, and intelligence can be developed in different ways. And you may feel like you have a fixed mindset in some ways and a growth mindset in others. For example, you may think with a fixed mindset that you're just not a math person, but you may adopt a growth mindset with writing, music, sports, or another discipline. In fact, scientists who study the brain have found that the brain is like a muscle. It changes and grows in response to what we do. The harder we work using helpful strategies and the more challenges we face, the stronger and smarter the brain becomes. This is because the brain is made up of cells called neurons, which are connected to each other. As we learn, the number of connections between our neurons also grows. As we continue to exercise our brains, the connections between our neurons grow as well. These new and stronger connections help to make us smarter. Scientists call this concept neuroplasticity. Research shows that students who adopt a growth mindset, who believe that their brains can grow and develop through effort and challenges, actually do better in school. For these students, the goal is not to prove what they already know, but rather to learn and grow. Students with a growth mindset view challenges and mistakes not as proof that they aren't smart enough, but as opportunities to become smarter. The good news is that you can develop a growth mindset. You've taken the first step by learning about some of the science that shows you can grow your brain. The next step is to consider your mindset. If you have some areas in which you think you aren't smart, challenge yourself to learn and grow. Why should you bother? Because if you learn to develop your mindset, you'll persist longer with problems. You'll take on harder challenges and stretch your mental muscle more. You won't be as affected by setbacks, and in the end, you'll learn more. And the effects of changing your mindset can stick with you for years, since you're training your brain to think in a new way.
This next one will blow your mind.
So check this out. Carol Dweck and her colleagues wanted to look into the impacts that praise had on children's development. So what they did is they took over 400 fifth grade students from all across the nation, and they did a really simple yet interesting study. Here's how it went down. They gave all the kids a really easy nonverbal IQ test. There were 10 questions, and at the end of the test, they praised all the children in one of two ways. The first group was praised for their intelligence. So they said, wow, great job. You must be really smart at this. Now the second group was praised for their effort. So they said, wow, great job. You must have worked really hard at this. Now this is a really subtle difference, but the impact it had is incredible. So after praising the kids and getting them divided up into the two groups, they gave them all an option for their next test. The first option was, hey, this next test is going to be a little bit harder, but it's going to be a great opportunity to learn and grow. Now, the second option was, this next test will be similar to the first, and you will surely do well on it. Now, the interesting thing is, out of the group that was praised for their intelligence, 67% of them chose the easier option, while 92% of the kids who were praised for their effort chose the harder test. This is unbelievable to think about, how just the subtle difference in the way that they were praised had such an impact. Carol Dweck explains why this happens.
Child or adult hears, oh, you think I'm brilliant and talented. That's why you admire me. That's why you value me. I better not do anything that will disprove this evaluation. As a result, they enter a fixed mindset, they play it safe in the future, and they limit the growth of their talents. Whereas focusing on the strategies they use, the way they're stretching themselves and taking on hard tasks, the intense practice they're doing, those are the kinds of things that say to a child or an older athlete, it's about the process of growth. As a result, they don't feel, oh, if I make a mistake, you won't think I'm talented. They think, oh, if I don't take on hard things and stick to them, I'm not going to grow.
Next, Dweck and her colleagues gave all the kids a really, really difficult test. It was one that they would surely fail, but they wanted to look at how the different kids attacked this challenge. Dweck noticed that the group that was praised for effort worked harder, longer, and actually enjoyed this test more than the group that was praised for their intelligence. This group got really frustrated with this test and had the tendency to give up early. After this artificially induced failure round, all of the kids were given a third and final test. Now, this test was the same level of difficulty as the first one, but check out the results. The group that was praised for their intelligence actually did worse on this test than the first one. Their average score actually dropped by 20%, while the group that was praised for their effort did significantly better, raising their average score by nearly 30%. This is a 50% difference in performance that was caused by a few subtle differences in the way that they were praised. This study shows how praise can either make or break a child's development. I mean, we all do it. We all want to be positive with the children we work with. So teachers, coaches, parents are always looking for ways to support their kids and tend to praise them quite a bit. So we need to look at research like this and realize, okay, praise is a good thing and there's nothing wrong with being positive, but we need to be very careful about praising someone's intelligence or abilities and focus more on the process and the effort that they put.
So praising isn't all good. We like to think so. And like any other parent, I remember when my daughters were little, I tried to praise them in order to try and encourage them. But you know, it's what do you praise? Praise process, praise effort, not praising results, scores, passing, or cleverness. Process and effort. Back to praise, actually. In that clip, Carol Dweck, Professor Carol Dweck, was seen and heard speaking. She's the author of Mindset. In fact, she's the, if you like, discoverer or inventor of the concept of a growth mindset. And this has transformed education. And any parent who's not aware of mindset and the impact that it can have and how to nurture a growth mindset is really missing an important idea. And you're probably inadvertently lumbering your child with a fixed mindset. That's why I'm educating you about it. Oh, and because it's such an important thing for parents to understand and implement, we also issue this book, Mindset, to the parents of every child on the 11+ course. Because we recognize the education of parents is so critical to the education of their children. Then we come to perspective. A realistic perspective on your part allows you to apply your energies where they really count for your child. So not those nonsense things that people think are the important things. You can actually focus on the actual important things. Right, this begins with a question again. Who is your greatest teacher? Whoever comes to mind, that's okay. Then I have a follow-up question. What knowledge, beliefs, and abilities were you born with? Okay, well, you won't remember, but you've seen your children born, you've seen what they're like, you've seen other people's children, and a little bit of common sense will tell you this, that we have no beliefs. Whatever beliefs we happen to be raised with, those are the beliefs we adopt. The same with knowledge. We have no knowledge whatsoever. You know, you pick up the language of the people that you grow up around, the beliefs of the people you grow up, the values of the people you grow up around, and so on. But we do have certain abilities. I mean, other than bodily functions, I mean, we have this fantastic ability for learning. We are learning machines. Now, let's look at where this learning takes place. Now, what we're doing is looking at the weekly hours of your typical 10-year-old. A week has 168 hours. That's 24 times 7. A child typically spends about 30 hours in school, maybe 3 hours in tuition, maybe 56, maybe even more, maybe could be more than 60 hours sleeping, a few hours doing extracurricular things outside of the home. And that leaves probably between 60 and 70 hours doing what? Well, I'll tell you where they are. They're at home because they're not out doing anything else. And they are in your care, under the influence of parents, in other words. All right, back to the question, who's your greatest teacher? Well, as adults, each of us is our own greatest teacher, and actually that goes for your 10-year-old child too. After that, it is our parents that are our greatest teachers, because they shape our mind management, you know, the foundation of everything else. The way our parents manage their minds is a model for us, and it's the first thing we experience. Likewise with mindset, and they really shape our models of ourselves and our place in the world, our outlook on the world, and that shapes everything else about our experience of the world. After that, though, it's our children who are our greatest teachers, because, so we're talking about your 10-year-old here, or even younger. They remind us what it is to be curious. And when we get really busy with life and working hard and worrying about many, you know, worthy things to worry about, we can lose sight of curiosity and the wonder of learning. They question the things we prefer not to have to justify. Oh, do it because I told you, because I'm your mom, because I'm your dad. And we don't want to have to justify what we are telling them to do. They remind us, this is very important, how ignorant we once were and how far we've come. Sometimes when we're trying to help our children or explain something to them, they don't understand. And we, as parents, can get frustrated sometimes. And we don't need to beat ourselves up about it, but it can help to understand that, you know what, there was a time when I did not know this thing that my son or my daughter does not know. There was a time when I did not understand this thing that I am now trying to explain to my son or daughter, and look at me, how far I have come. And it gives us the reassurance that we have come from complete ignorance to awareness as adults, and that therefore we know our children will get there. They just need us to be understanding, patient. And very importantly, they're not cynical about the world yet, and they need never be. It all does depend a lot on you and how you parent them. So flourishing. Flourishing, I break it down from 100% into 50, 40, 10 when a child is aged 10. And I reckon that 50% of a child's flourishing is in their own hands. It's under their own control. 50% is in the self. And that 40% is still with parents. And that 10% is the rest of the world, which includes formal education. So that includes tuition, formal education, and so on, okay? And their contact with the world. Now, from this, I think it can be illuminating that In fact, 90%, a whopping 90% of the power, the influence over your child's flourishing, your 10-year-old's flourishing, is actually in the hands of you and your child. What I see though with parents very often is that they say, here, Mr. Taylor, I'm putting my child with you. I'm expecting them get into grammar school. Well, you know, we're going to do a great job of helping, but we're probably about 1%, you know, school being most of the 10%, but you and your child are the 90%. You just need to know how to do it, which is why I'm here. I'm showing you that the majority of the power over your child's flourishing isn't with me or the school or the university. It's with you and your child. You just need to know how to tap into it. Now, talking of at age 10, of course, when we're babies, when we're newborns, then it's almost 100% in the hands of our parents, our families. And because children have little contact with the outside world, almost zero with the outside world, and almost zero with the child themselves. But as the child grows, learns, ages, and has more contact with the outside world, then the balance shifts. And by age 10, I think this is a reasonable balance on average. And of course, by the time we're adults, if we've been raised properly, almost 100% of our flourishing is in our own hands, and almost zero in the hands of parents, and almost zero in the rest of the world. In short, neither the academic flourishing of your child nor their flourishing as a person relies on which school or university they go to. So if you really want to bust a gut and work hard at something, it's that 90%, not that 10%. Pay and absolve. I'll explain what I mean by that. If I have problems with my car, I am no mechanic, and I am not inclined to start working out what's wrong with my car and how to fix it and what have you. I'm going to take it to a garage and I'm going to say, I'm having a problem with my car. This is a problem I'm having. Can you look into it, please? And they'll call me and say, yes, Mr. Taylor, it's this, that. It's going to cost this much. I say, great, thank you. Go ahead, fix it. And then I'll go and pick up my car. I'll pay for it. I'm not interested in this is the part we took out. I'll only have to take their word for it anyway. And that the fact that it's faulty and so on. I just essentially pay them and absolve myself of all responsibility for the actual repair. And I do the same thing if I have problems with my computer. But you can't do that when it comes to education. You can't do that when it comes to your primary school child's education. You can't just leave your primary school child with a school or a tutor and leave them to it. Because when they're this age, the overlap between parenting and teaching is too great. It isn't like leaving your car at a garage or your computer at a repair shop. You can't do that. Okay, so yes, we all know why you're here. You're trying to do your best for your child, and I'm here to try and help you to do that. Well, so I have to make this point. So if you do want the best for your child, then number one, don't compare them. Don't compare them. Don't compare them to you. Don't compare them to their brother, especially not to their brother or their sister. Sibling comparison is the most destructive comparison you can make. Don't compare them to their school friend or their grandparents or their uncle or their cousin or somebody in the media. Don't compare. Comparison is unkind. It's often manipulative. It stifles the human. It brings out the chimp. The only person you should try to be better than is the person you were yesterday. Show your child how effective they are at learning. Remind them that 2 years ago, they did not know their times tables at all, and look at them now. You can think of many things that your child has learned and show them that there was a time not that long ago when they didn't understand this thing or they didn't know that fact, and look at them now. Show them how effective they have been at learning. Leave out the comparisons with others. Isn't your child a worthy human being in their own right without comparison to somebody else? Okay, back to this point then. So you want the best for your child. The best for your child isn't necessarily what's best for other people. It isn't necessarily what was best for their brother or their sister. Maybe their brother or their sister went to a grammar school, and maybe grammar school was good for them, but maybe it's not best for this child. This child is not their brother or their sister or any other person. This child is this child. It's this person. And it might be that you have adopted a particular profession and you think this is a good profession, but maybe it's not right for your child. So what is best for your child does depend on your child. So you have to know and respect their aptitudes, their natural inclinations, their interests, and value them for who they are. Because what's best for them depends on those things. So your child's desire to please you can mislead you into believing that they want what you want for them, causing you to make choices that undermine their flourishing as human beings. This is the only thing in the entire presentation which is highlighted, and it's for a reason, because it's a big pitfall that parents fall into. What happens is that when they're little and they show any aptitude, then with the talk within the family, oh, she's going to grow up to be a doctor. Not that there's anything wrong with being a doctor if that's what they're cut out for. But, you know, this is a tradition in many cultures. And then the child starts saying, oh, yes, I'm going to be a doctor when I grow up. I'm going to go into medicine. I'm going to go and be a doctor. And so they're repeating what they've heard. The seed has been planted. Your child then never gets to know what they really want. And you go on thinking you're supporting them in what they want. And they think that they're doing what you want them to be doing. And then they end up going into a profession and wondering why it is that they don't feel happy in it, why they don't feel fulfilled by their work. And it comes back to this. So don't plant the seed. Get to know your child before you start planting seeds. So be wary of wishing your child or trying to turn them into someone they are not. You cannot do that without stifling your child's true self. How tragic that is. Well then, who are grammar schools suited to? Because they're not suited to many children. Well, the expectations and workload in a grammar school are appropriate for children who have high academic potential, to which you must ask, of course, how high? And the answer is the grammar schools suit the learning needs of about the top 25% most academic children, meaning children above the 75th percentile approximately. This means 3 out of 4 children are not cut out for grammar school. This means, in fact, that 3 out of 4 children would find grammar school is terrible for their flourishing. It would be an unsafe place for them to be. Why? Well, it's likely to be overwhelming and damaging. Why? It's important for you to understand this, because many parents just set their sights. My child has to go to grammar school. My child has to go to grammar school. And they haven't even thought, is grammar school going to be, you know, safe for their child? And for 3 out of 4 children, it isn't. Because what happens is grammar school is for highly academic children. Now, you imagine that a child who goes into, somehow is transported into a grammar school and did not earn their place there. Or they somehow scrape through. And they will find that they are bottom of the class all the time in every subject. They find themselves hoping and praying that somebody else gets a lower score than they do. Somebody else is bottom for a change and they can be second from the bottom. And that's a great relief. Now you imagine spending the rest of your childhood from the age of 11, where you are bottom of the class and you're dreading every time that scores come out, and you're hoping and praying that somebody else will be bottom for a change. If you don't understand how that will destroy a child's self-esteem and be extremely damaging to them, then I suggest you go away and think about that, because that is what would happen if the 3/4 of children who are not cut out for grammar school somehow got in there. So don't wish that on your child. If your child is kind of in the top quarter, then they can flourish in a grammar school and it can be a good place for them to be. But if your child is not in that top quarter, why would you wish it on them? So back to that slide early on about the things that parents think are most important for preparing children. And of course, they are mistaken. So it's not the test formats and patterns and is it CEM, is it GL, it's the exam techniques, it's the speed, it's the word list, it's the flashcards, it's the practice, it's the comprehension practice, it's mocks. No, all that's mistaken. So let's look at what's really important in preparing. So 11 plus stuff. Here's a fact that most people don't tell you and don't know, which is that everything in 11 plus is simple. Non-verbal is simple, maths is simple, verbal reasoning is simple. There's only one thing which isn't, and that is English. Everything in 11 plus is simple except English, because English is a language, and like all languages, it's huge, it's massive, it's infinite in what it can express, and it's complex. And it takes a lifetime to master it sufficiently. This is not the kind of English you sit in a classroom and you learn and a teacher teaches you English. This is the kind of English that you can only learn by immersion in the language of English, because it's too sophisticated and complex to learn in a classroom. Sure, you can learn technical aspects of it, but they're the least important. So why do most grammar schools disclose the name of the organization that sets the test papers then? Why do they say this is GL? And like, you know, Birmingham is CEM, Manchester uses CEM, Slough uses CEM, Kent uses GL, Sutton uses GL, and so on. Why do they tell you that? Well, that's why they tell you. Why do they disclose that if it's not important? Well, the answer is in the question. It's because the information is useless to you, because it's trivial. And of course, parents go away with the opposite impression, think, oh, if they're telling us that, it must be important. No, it's the opposite. They're giving you minimal information about the test format and contents. They are actually testing the same skills and knowledge. And so are all the rest. So it doesn't matter who it is that's providing the test or what the detailed format and pattern of the test is. No, what your child needs to learn is, if you like, the knowledge and skills and the concepts that are being tested. That's what is important. And what is it that's being tested? Well, of course, literacy, reasoning with language, that being British English, which is about 75% of the test. And not just some tests, but all tests. With some, it's even more than that. How can I say it's 75%? Well, I'm going to explain that. And by the way, I mentioned British English because it's very easily confused with American English, which is not quite the same. There are small differences, which are, I would say the overlap between British and American English is about 95% or just over. But they are different languages. And Indian English is very different, and Pakistani English. There are many variations on English, many versions of English which differ. New Zealand English, Australian English, South African English, and so on. It's British English. Why 75%? Well, look, you know what? Numeracy is also tested. Reasoning with quantities, numbers, knowledge of maths, problem-solving skills. All that's really important. Yes, spatial or pictorial skills. This is non-verbal reasoning. Reasoning with shapes, knowledge of shapes, observation, spatial skill. Well, then how can I say that English is 75% if it's one of 3 subjects? Well, I'm going to tell you. Because maths is so easy that any child can excel in doing the numbers. That is a low-level skill. What is the higher level skill is actually understanding the question, the scenario of the question, and then understanding the question itself. That's the higher level skill. And that is the skill of English. That is the skill of literacy. When children are not able to excel in maths, primarily it's for 2 reasons. The most important reason is that they're weak in their mastery of English. They don't understand the scenario. Or they don't understand the question, or both, most likely. And that prevents them from ever being really good at maths. And that happens in 11 plus a lot. And the other reason, which is slightly less important, but very important, is that parents have trained them to use written methods, which is the lowest level of all math skills. And they're thinking that they're equipping their child and giving them a head start. Whereas in fact, what you're doing is lumbering your child with written methods, and then they are resistant to mental methods and estimating, which are much more useful and powerful, and they are higher level skills. All the instructions in 11 plus are in English. All the examples are in English. At least half the marks in maths are for English. So can you see now that actually mastery of English is a good 75% of what is being tested, and it is the most complex thing there is in 11 plus. So I mentioned already instructions. Speed. Speed is important, but it's not a thing that you can learn on its own. Speed is actually the result of understanding the concepts and the methods that are being taught. And then speed comes as a result of that. It's not a topic. And of course, ultimately a test is measuring the ability to perform in tests, and some people have a knack for it, and some people fall apart. So what is needed in order to prepare for such a test? Well, first of all, of course, an excellent syllabus, which I myself write. They need to be taught well. I teach the entire syllabus to every pupil and parent for on the foundation course and the 11 plus course, and I record myself doing it, and you and your child have unlimited repeat access to my teaching of every syllabus unit. You know, throughout this presentation, I've been asking you a lot of questions. Now, if this was a lesson, there would be only a small handful of you there. And I'd not just be asking the questions in a rhetorical way, I would be asking you to answer them. So whereas today you can get away with not really taking part in my lesson or the lessons of my colleagues, you can't get away with that. You need to participate because that's how learning takes place. Question and answer. And you can only do that in a small group. They need feedback and guidance. They need to see somebody to help shape their thinking, somebody to help correct their thinking, not just scores in tests. Scores are useful for pointing to learning needs, that's all. They're not a source for worry, and they are not a source for rejoicing either. Scores are just useful for seeing, well, okay, you seem to know this, let's focus on something else. Or you seem to have stumbled upon some things here, let's look at what learning needs you have, what concepts, what methods, what facts you didn't know. They need suitable practice resources, which are a commodity. You can get those anywhere, and they're not expensive either. And they need someone to turn to when they have questions on our programs. Everybody has someone to turn to when they have questions. And above all, they need your support. That is you, mum, you, dad. They need your support. And last but not least, you, mum and dad, are not educators, or one or two of you might be, but you are not 11 plus professionals. You need someone to educate and guide you in how to support your child's learning. And I am at your service, and it's what I am doing today. I can do that continuously throughout my courses, providing guidance and education to you, and so do my colleagues. As I hope you've seen today, that, you know, sometimes the things that you are doing are not necessarily supporting your child's learning. They might very well be undermining them. So since English is the most complex, it's the hardest thing in 11 plus, what can you do to improve mastery of English? So here's a long list of things you can do, and all of them are free. Children could read daily from a variety of sources, a total of at least 30 minutes, preferably an hour a day when there is no school. Read a mixture of fiction and non-fiction. The more variety, the better. Read different genres and authors. Vary the non-fiction, things like encyclopedias, newspapers, magazine, internet articles, and so on. Insist that your child speaks in sentences, expresses themselves clearly and accurately, and don't finish their sentences for them. Learn words in context as far as possible in order to better appreciate their usage and meanings, rather than from word lists. Somebody gives you a word list, burn it. Learn a few new words every day. And you yourself, mum and dad, can develop your English and vocabulary. Why would that be good? Well, good for you, but also good for your child. Because if it's good enough for mum and dad, it's good enough for them. Your child looks up to you. And if you're telling them, oh, you must read, you must read, you must read, it's so good for you, and they see that you don't actually read, then they're going to think, well, it's good enough for my mum, she doesn't read, so it's obviously all right for me as well. You have to be a good role model of learning, reading, mind management, and a growth mindset. Don't say, do as I say, not as I do. You have to walk your talk. If you want your child to believe in persevering with efforts to learn, let them see a worthy example to follow. You have to be a role model. When you're choosing tuition, which I presume some of you are, then the tuition should optimize learning, not testing. The group needs to be small for reasons I won't labor here, but it's so powerful, the small group format, and it's the interaction that every child has, the chance that they get to be asked questions, to ask their questions, to interact with the tutor and with the other children, the opportunity that the tutor has to observe things about your child, about their learning needs, about their progress, which they would feed back to you as part of the individual learning plan, so that you too can focus your efforts where they're going to help your child the most. The group has to be small, 10 or less. The tutor marks some of the homework again to get insights into learning needs of your child and their progress. And also, of course, nobody goes into business and says, well, we're not very good at what we do. Everybody is. But do they guarantee it? We do. We're, as far as I know, the only people in 11 plus world who are sincere enough in our belief in what we do to actually provide a money back guarantee. Please refer to our terms and conditions for the 11 plus course to see details of that. Now, things to watch out for, red flags, things that if you see these features, run away. That is not about your child and their learning. If they pack more than 12 people in a room, it's about making money. It is not about your child's education. If they give a pre-test before accepting pupils, then they're essentially saying, we can't teach your child. So they better already know their stuff. If the tutor does not mark any homework, that too is not about your child's education. It's about profit and kind of shortchanging your child and youth. If you yourself do not have access to the learning, you, who is the most powerful person other than your own child, you have one hand tied behind your back. That's not about your child's education. The focus is on testing instead of learning, or on the volume of work instead of the quality of work, or how you use the resources. There's a lot of that going on. If they stoke up hype about techniques, test scores, CEMGL, test formats, mocks, and so on, that is because they're not really teaching your child and they're trying to engage your chimp rather than your human. It means they're not really teaching your child. So they'd rather draw your attention away from that, the important thing. Here's a little plug. All the things I've talked about in this presentation, they're actually the foundation for my courses. The values and insights I've shared, they're built into my courses. We use highly interactive small group formats. We work at optimizing our collaboration with you. You have access, 24/7 access to your child's performance, to their individual learning plan, to the actual learning. The flagship 11 plus course is so effective, it comes with a money back guarantee. And this is not something new. This is something that's been going on for over 20 years. The foundation course, I have written it, devised it specifically as preparation for the 11 plus course. It's a stepping stone onto the 11 plus course. The 11 plus course is highly demanding, and the foundation course helps children to be better prepared for it. Live lessons, they run in various physical venues in Feltham, Hounslow, Cranford, Langley, and Slough, but they also take place at a computer. And even as we speak, lessons are taking place. So in other words, wherever in the country, nay, wherever in the world you are, your child can benefit from the education that we provide. All the values I have expressed in this presentation. So then you might be considering Zoom for your child, and then the old experience of our own lives where we think, no, it's got to be in a room. There's something about a room. So how do you decide? Live lessons make up only about 20% of the work, which means 80% of the work is not in the live lesson. That's the first thing. And that 80% is the same whether your child accesses live lessons in a room or in a virtual room via Zoom. Same lesson. And even if they do experience the lesson in a room or via Zoom, it is the same lesson. So who would opt for the Zoom then? Well, it's convenient and safe. So convenience and safety of lessons from home. You save money because the fees are less, because our fees reflect the actual costs. You save time traveling, time packing, time waiting to sign your child out, time finding parking. And Zoom lessons are better, more effective for children who feel vulnerable away from home, as some children do. They feel quite confident and safe when they're at home and will participate better as a result. Room lessons allow greater scrutiny of children and their work by the learning coach, and there are fewer potential distractions because they're not in their bedroom, they're not at home, they haven't got their family, family events going on around the household. They are better for children with concentration issues, and there are a small handful of children with concentration issues for whom Zoom lessons won't work well. Other than that, they're pretty much on a par from my experience. Okay then, Mr. Taylor, since 11 plus is straightforward, apart from the English, and Sir Taylor's system is so effective, which it is, why doesn't every pupil qualify in 11 plus? I think you already know the answer, but I will restate it here. 1, it is the key design feature of the test. It is a selection test, and it is attempting to select the children who are in the top quarter. This means by definition that 3 out of 4 children are not going to qualify. That is the key design feature of the 11 plus test. After that understanding, it is down to poor mind management skills and poor mindset. Remember the 2 bottom layers of the pyramid of flourishing. Poor mind management skills means that everything above is somewhat undermined. Fixed mindset, without a fixed, if they have a fixed mindset, then everything above the mindset in the pyramid is undermined. Lack of a foundation. Language, especially language and general knowledge, are not learned in a classroom in the space of a couple of years. They are learned over a lifetime by paying attention to what's going on around you, taking an interest in all things. And many children haven't done that. And suddenly parents think, well, let's put them into tuition in the last couple of years and we'll blitz it. You can't do that. Lack of parental support and involvement. This is not a criticism of parents. I know that many parents are working really hard and have very little time and energy after they've finished trying to make ends meet and fulfill all their other responsibilities. But it does make a difference to your child. The involvement of parents gives a real boost if you're in a position to do that. They simply had a bad day on the day of the test. That happens for reasons I've already mentioned, things which are completely unpredictable and out of the control of everybody. And it does happen, and by the way, they had a bad day is why the appeal system exists, because children who very clearly should have gone to grammar school for reasons beyond the control of anybody didn't, and the appeal system is for them. Ultimately, back to number 1, grammar school is wrong for that child, and therefore not getting through to a grammar school has done that child a great service. What a result, and should be celebrated with that understanding. So how do you feel in control and remove the stress of 11 plus? Because lots of people generate lots of unnecessary stress about 11 plus. A lot of it is to do with mind management and mindset. Well, you know when you're in charge and when the chimp is in charge. So try and be in charge yourself, i.e. you're human and not the chimp. Steer clear of the hype. There are plenty of hype merchants, a lot of them are tutors and other parents. Steer clear of the hype. Remember, it's about your child's flourishing. It's not about grammar school. It's about your child's flourishing. And sustain a growth mindset. If you make it about the learning rather than about scores and passing, you and your child will succeed spectacularly. Not learning is really the only failure. Here's a summary. Flourishing requires effective mind management and a growth mindset. And here's the perspective, 50, 40, 10. There are the 3 L's, logic, language, and a love of learning. This is all to do with a growth mindset. They're prerequisites of excelling in 11+. Choose small group tuition that prioritize engagement and learning rather than hype and testing. You can book now for the current Sir Taylor 11+ course, which is for children who've just entered year 5, or the Sir Taylor Foundation course, which I mentioned is preparation for the 11+ course, and that is for children who've just entered year 4. That course, the Foundation course, starts next weekend, next Saturday, and the 11+ course started about a week ago. Session 2 is taking place this weekend. Live lessons in small, highly interactive groups. I practice what I preach. Coaching for you as well as your child. It's taking place here today. You both, that is you and your child, have access to 100% of the syllabus teaching, and that's done by me, the course author and 11+ expert. 24/7 access to the actual teaching, scores, schedule, and the individual learning plan, the ILP, which records your child's any noteworthy progress and how to progress further. Someone to turn to for help. You always have someone to turn to for help. You're not on your own. If it's an administrative query, you can call us 7 days a week and ask one of my colleagues during lunch time, between the hours of noon and 3. If it's to do with your child's learning needs and how to address them, you can get written guidance from the learning coach, the tutor. If it's something sort of not routine, something very specific to you, you can talk to me. I'm here for all the parents and children. That is via Zoom. And you have access to this proven values-driven program. As I mentioned, the values I have expressed in this, the insights that I have shared with you are built into the program. It's why it's so powerful. It's why it comes with a guarantee. What's not to like? There's always something. Nevertheless, I should mention that, you know, if you didn't quite make it for the start of the course, don't worry. If your child has missed the beginning of the course, we will waive the charge for worksheets and video lessons. So normally somebody who's a late joiner would pay for access to the worksheets, video lessons, and the books or publications, pubs we call them, that were issued earlier than the starting or joining date. But we will waive the charge for the worksheets and the video lessons. You will only need to pay for the books that we've issued because we buy those in to pass on to you. So in effect, they can catch up on the learning for free. You're welcome. Call us today. That's our number right there. And I mean literally today, Sunday, anytime between 12 and 3, somebody will be there. And if they happen to be busy, they'll give you a call back ASAP. Secure your child's place on one of our courses. Book a free Zoom call with me. You can do that and give a call and say, oh, I need to ask some questions, Mr. Taylor. And you will qualify for the autumn offer if your child happens to have missed a lesson or two. As I mentioned, 7 days a week, 12 noon till 3 for phone calls. Here's a little plea from me. Don't keep a good thing to yourself. Spread the word. If you think you've learned something useful or gained an important insight today, maybe corrected a misunderstanding or misinformation, then that's a good thing. Spread it to others. People you care about, you know, people who are your friends. Tell them, friends and relations. Tell them about Sir Taylor's unique values-based education. Give us a mention in your social media if you use them. Give us a Google review. It would be nice to get a 5-star review if you think that we've earned it. We are not run for the purpose of accumulating profit, unlike every other 11+ tuition company I know, but to provide the best possible education and guidance that we can. Does this even matter to you? Here's an end thought. Every parent, that is you and me, has the chance to make the world a better place by the example they set for their children. What's the alternative? In other words, if we're not setting a great example for our children, what are we doing? Thank you very much for your attention. If you have to leave, then stay well and thank you for attendance. But I hope you'll be able to stay, and I hope that somebody has a question or two, because it is Q&A time. And with the Q&A, even if you yourself don't have a question, sometimes you somebody else has a question that you wish you had thought of, and you can learn from that. This is actually part of the power of the small group tuition that we do, is that I am constantly surprised, despite having done this particular thing for 20 years and being in the world of teaching and education for 36 years, I am surprised by things that children ask, things that they say, contributions that they make, which are educational to everybody else present, including me. Okay, now I'm going to stop the screen share. Hello. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to lower all hands. Some inadvertently do stay up. And if you have a question, raise your hand. And then what happens is I see a list of names, whatever name happens to be on your Zoom account. And if you put your hand up, then your name goes to the top of the list. I can see that you have a question. Okay. Now, if you don't have a question, that's fine. I must have been very effective. But if you do have a question, then raise your hand and I'll do my best to address it as well as I can. If you do have a question and you'd rather not asking in this public forum, because the event is of course recorded, you can give my team a call and arrange a Zoom call with me privately. Okay, we have a question from, the first one is from Tarak. Okay, Tarak, I'm going to allow you to speak. You won't appear on screen, but we'll be able to hear you. So if you would please enable yourself to speak, i.e. unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question. Hello, are you there?
Hi.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Hi. How do you inspire your children? Like, how do you make them achieve some target, or you would make them work hard?
Well, this comes down to two things. The two, if you like, bottom layers of the pyramid: the mind management, the bottom layer, and the next layer, mindset. Mind management is really just about not being led by emotions. As you know, children will kind of do the thing if they're in the mood to do it. They'll do the thing if it's fun to do, if it's easy to do, and so on. That's all chimp. That's all chimp. And the more we teach our children about that isn't you, that is not you, that is your chimp, the better educated they are, the more they will prioritize the things which are actually good for them. Not that playing is not good, playing is very good, playing is healthy. But the point is, it's education about mind management and not always making choices about what feels good. Remember, we are not our feelings. In essence, all the things that I have mentioned in this presentation about we are not our feelings, and that all those emotionally led decisions are not us, made by us, they're being made by our chimps. This is something we need to teach our children, and we do. We teach this it's all part of the program. That's number one. Number two is mindset. Mindset is so transformed education and understanding of learning that what we teach children is, I mentioned it in passing in the presentation, but you know, what children are accustomed to, or many children are accustomed, and many parents are accustomed to, is that their child does a test and they get 10 out of 10 or 20 out of 20, and they think that's a good thing. And I think that's the bad thing. Why? Well, because when you do a test and you get 10 out of 10 or full marks, it means you learn nothing from it. You don't learn anything because you already knew everything. Otherwise, you couldn't have got the full marks. Do you see? And this is something that the chimp doesn't understand. The chimp likes the satisfaction, the achievement of getting 10 out of 10. And the human is thinking, what a waste of time that was. I haven't learned anything. Because the growth mindset is about learning. It's about treating everything as a learning opportunity. And so when a child has a growth mindset, they view lessons, workbooks, worksheets, video lessons, everything as a learning opportunity. And they embrace it because they want to grow their mind. They want to grow their intelligence. They want to understand the concepts, the methods. They want the knowledge that they were lacking. And that's motivation. That's inspiration. It's mindset. So I'm teaching you mindset here today. Well, I'm giving you an introduction to it, but you know, I'm issuing you the tools to equip yourself. And I'm emphasizing to you the importance of it. And we do this. It's just part of the way the program is structured. It's part of the teaching. We're not just teaching the children maths, which is baby stuff. Maths is a doddle, completely doddle. So is nonverbal, and so is verbal reasoning. The real obstacles to children being able to flourish are not the subject. The syllabus stuff is really easy, apart from English. It's all this pyramid. It's the mind management mindset and the perspective that actually that's where the real power is to flourish. And that is where we do it. And if it's about goals, as in I mentioned, you know, the outcomes, the traditional outcomes, the scores, the passing, the school, and that, you want to put that to one side because you think that those are things to aspire to, but actually that all of that stuff, what it actually achieves is a fixed mindset, and it handicaps children from growth and learning. And so the growth of children's learning, them adopting the growth mindset and embracing everything as a learning opportunity is what enables them to achieve the things that they do want to achieve. Making those things a goals in themselves has the opposite impact of what you might imagine it does. I don't know if that helps at all, sir.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much for your question, sir. I'll now mute you. Right. I'll now again lower all hands and see if we have any other questions that I might be able to help with. Please do feel free. Okay. At the moment, there aren't any, so I'll, and that's absolutely fine because I've given you a lot of food for thought. Let me just lower all hands again. Okay, I have again lowered all hands. Now, if you have a question, then please raise your hand. Okay, we have a couple more questions. All right, the next person then is on my screen appears as Manpreet. Manpreet, I'm going to allow you to speak. So please unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question.
Hello, this is Mr. Gill.
Hello. All right,
Hello.
okay. Hello, Mr. Gill.
Hello. So my question was more around how do you assess and view potential of a child? So obviously I wish my child to succeed in her education. I hope she is intelligent for her own sake. But how do you assess that she should be on your course?
Any child who wants to learn and is prepared to work hard should be on my course. That's the first thing.
Okay.
Because the course is not just about getting into a grammar school. It is about education. Sir, you mentioned that you want your child to succeed in their education. Well, the number one criterion is grasping mind management and not being emotionally driven, but being logically driven. And secondly, it's about mindset and embracing everything as a learning opportunity. Now, if a child embraces a growth mindset and has good mind management skills, which they would learn generally from parents, they have succeeded in their education, because that's real education. You know, many people measure success in education by how many GCSEs you get and how many A stars you get. I know it's all changed now. It's numbers, it's not grades. I'm not up to date with that, the number thing. But, you know, success in education, if you're measuring it by which school you got into and how many O-levels you got, and well, that's not education, that is qualifications. Those are ticks in boxes. That's not education. So number one, you've got to stop measuring success in education by what school you got to and how many O levels and how many, look how old fashioned that is, O levels. They went out in 1985, GCSEs that your child has got and what university they got to and how much money are they earning and all that. That isn't success. No, success is having good mind management and good mindset. That is success in education. And how do we evaluate that? How do we assess that? Well, you know, we do not select children for the program. Children, or more normally parents, select us because they like the values and the quality of our actual education. And it's not got to get into grammar school, got to pass 11 plus, whether it's good for you or not, you're going to go to a grammar school. You know, that nonsense, that childish chimp kind of thing. We don't practice that. And we in fact do all we can to try and inform and educate parents and children against that, to guard against that. So we are chosen by people who share us to our values to a great extent. And how do we evaluate? Well, you know, a child's potential. Now that's something you cannot actually ever evaluate objectively. I mean, you know, the 11 plus test aims to do something along those lines, because what they're really trying to do is select children on their academic potential. But you can never measure potential directly. The best they can do is this test, which is not a very good way to do it. I don't think the 11 plus test is a very good way of trying to select children with high academic potential. But, you know, it's the best that they can do. A better way is to actually interact with the child. I mean, parents do it more than anybody else, and they have more opportunity to do it than anybody else. But the way we interact in small groups, lots of question and answer, lets us into the workings of the mind of the child. And by asking them questions and seeing how well they respond, by stretching them a little bit to see, are they able to actually just take that one little step forward beyond what they think they can already do? Are they prepared to actually hazard what the next step might be without knowing? Are they prepared to actually try and create this new thought in their mind? Are they prepared to create a new pathway in their brain? And they have the opportunity to do that because of our small group and the question and answer, the interactive nature of it. It takes that interaction. And so the interaction that takes place during live lessons, that's the best insight into a child's learning potential, their growth potential. Many children, they come with, if you like, sort of better than average or knowledge or skills of things, but we find that they're not so ready to grow. And they get overtaken quite quickly by children who are more ready to grow. So it's this readiness to learn. So it's what I started off saying to you, sir, which is it's that growth mindset. That is success in education. Growth mindset means that the child embraces everything as a learning opportunity. And when they come across something which is challenging, whereas a child with a more of a fixed mindset says, oh, and they feel bad about themselves and they think they've messed up, and parents with with a fixed mindset will look at their child who got 6 out of 10 and say, oh, you didn't do very well in that. Well, next week you'll do better. Instead, the one with the growth mindset will get 6 out of 10 and say, oh, wow, I got 4 questions wrong. I wonder where I went wrong. I wonder what mistakes I made. I wonder what it is that I, where I miscalculated, or what did I misread the question, or was there something I didn't know? The child with the growth mindset is looking at that and saying, great, I didn't get 10 out of 10. So I've got something here to learn from something where I thought I knew it, but I obviously didn't. Wow, what an education that is. And the parents of the child with the growth mindset and the parents with the growth mindset won't be looking at the number and thinking this means something. They'll be looking at the number and thinking, there might be some learning needs here. Wow, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Taylor, for giving us this score. Now, let's have a look at that sheet and see what things it is that my child didn't already know or couldn't already do or didn't understand properly, so that we can address this learning need. This is how learning takes place. And that's why I mentioned, getting high scores in tests isn't necessarily good for learning. It might be good for the ego boost, which is all chimp. It's not good for learning. So yes, we don't assess children who should be on the course. Any child who is receptive to learning is welcome, and the course is for them, and they will get a huge boost to their education. Many parents say to me, sir, that they have put their child on my course, but they don't want to send them to grammar school because they know their child is going to get a huge boost. And that's why they put their child on the course. And many parents have understood that grammar school is not the be all and the end all, and not going to a grammar school, it's fine, because if your child has control over their chimp, i.e. their mind management is sound and they have a growth mindset, they are going to excel wherever they go to school, because their flourishing doesn't depend nearly as much on the school as many parents think it does. It really doesn't. Grammar school is good for certain children, and it's really terrible for most children, but a child who has the growth mindset and the eagerness, the willingness to learn, they're unstoppable. They are going to excel wherever they go. And many times children who have done my program and did not go to a grammar school, they're excelling in their comprehensive schools. So that is, it's all about mindset, and it's about how do we define success. Success generally, but also success in education, which is what you asked about, sir. So I don't know if that helped you at all, sir. But I can't hear you now, but I might have muted you, sorry. Right.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you for your question, sir. I'm now going to lower all hands and see if anybody else does have a question. Please feel free to raise your hand. Okay, now at the moment, I'm not seeing any hands, and that's fine. But if you have a question, don't feel embarrassed. There's no such thing as a bad question. Can I just say this? And we do say this to the children also, that you must ask. If there's something in your mind, please ask, because the thing that you ask may actually open up a great world of insight and knowledge without you having realized it. And what you think might be a silly question might actually be a very illuminating question. So please do ask. No thing as a silly question. Okay, we have a question from Jaya, or at least that's the name on my screen. So I'm allowing you to speak. Please unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question.
Hi.
Yes, hi.
You did mention about the course material, but is it a standard course material that available in the market, or do you have your own course material developed in the past 20 years? How do you support
two kinds of resources, right? And it's important to understand the difference between them. There are teaching resources and there are practice resources. Our teaching resources are mine. They're the important ones. Practice resources are a commodity. Practice resources are practice resources. Do you understand? It does not matter who publishes them. It does not matter who writes them. It doesn't matter, because there are vast amounts of practice resources. So we're talking about workbooks, practice papers, mocks, all of that. Those are practice resources. And with practice resources, they are much of a muchness. Teaching is a different thing, sir. Teaching resources have to be good. Teaching resources have to be special. So our teaching resources are my teaching resources. I am the expert, and that our teaching resources are not available elsewhere. So differentiate, very importantly, differentiate between teaching resources and practice resources, because many people do not appreciate the difference, and tutors and companies will take advantage of that ignorance. So Our teaching resources are second to none, and practice resources are much of a muchness. Anybody can get hold of vast amounts of very suitable practice resources, and not at not great expense either. So it's the teaching resources that really matter, and ours are unique to us. Does that help you, sir?
Thank you. That's more clear.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you for your questions, sir. Okay. Now, again, I'm lowering all hands. And if you do have a question, please take the opportunity to ask it now. All the questions we've had today, thank you very much for asking those. They've been really useful and interesting and addressed things that I didn't really have the opportunity to address in my set presentation. Okay, I'm going to count. Okay, going once, going twice, going thrice. Okay, no more hands. I'm not going to answer any more questions here today, but I will point out that if you do want to have more information or you have more questions and queries, please contact us. You can telephone our support team 7 days a week, 12 noon till 3 p.m. You can request a meeting with me if your question is a bit intricate, a bit involved, a bit complex. That's fine. Make a Zoom call with me. I do take Zoom calls a couple of evenings a week, so you might have to wait because they can tend to get booked up ahead of time. And remember that if your child hasn't already joined the course, naughty, they can join and have free access because we're waiving the charge for the worksheets and the video lessons. You would only have to buy any books that we have already issued. Thank you very much for attending today. Hope you found it useful, and please do contact us if you would like to know more. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday and stay well. Thank you.